Is that? Well, okay, everybody, it's 10 o'clock. We're going to start with opening prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us to this new week. Thank you for letting us know where we are in time and giving us the power to prepare. Please help us to understand and remember your message for this time so that we can be teachers like you called us to be. Continue to be with us today and this week, and thank you for providing for all of our needs and for protecting us. In Jesus' name, amen.
So welcome everybody to the Youth Prophecy Group meeting number 27. We're the Flucases. I'm Seth.
I'm Syria.
I'm Samaria.
Today's April 12th, 2020, and the title of today's lesson is Two Perspectives of Daniel 11:40. Two versions of Daniel 11:40.
So it is now quiz time. So this is a quiz on the last week's lesson. Okay. So first question. When was the first woe? When did the first woe begin?
E.
Any other answers? You can type it if you want.
Should we say?
E.
Okay. So the answer was E, July 27th, 1299. Next question. When did the second woe and sixth trumpet begin? Okay, the answer was A, July 27th, 1449. When did the third woe begin? Okay, so this time I'm going to ask Eric. Eric, do you know when the third woe began?
So August 11th, 1840. So C.
Okay.
What about David? He was here.
David, if you want to put it in the chat, you can, or you can say it if you want to.
Repeat the question.
Okay, I'm just going to go on. So the answer was F, September 11, 2001. The third woe began on 9/11. Next question. When did the fifth trumpet begin?
E.
Okay. The answer is D, AD 606. The fifth trumpet began in 606. And the last question, when did the seventh trumpet begin? And this question is for you, David. So you can put in the chat or you can say it, whichever one.
Anyone else want to answer?
October 22nd, 1844.
Correct. The seventh trumpet began on October 22nd, 1844. So that was all the questions.
Congratulations.
So that was all the questions, and congratulations to all of you who answered the correct answers.
And next week we're having a quiz on this lesson, so
Okay,
remember
attention.
that for next time.
Mhm.
So we already said the title of today's lesson. There's two versions of Daniel 11:40.
In this lesson, we will be looking at the two different versions, which is the Millerites and ours, of Daniel 11:40. Daniel 11:40 was the first verse in Daniel 11 to be prophetically understood. In the first dispensation on the priest line, which we know is 1989 to 2001, 1989 to 2001, Daniel 11:40 was opened up along with verses 41 through 45 and line upon line. But as time passed, this movement realized that Daniel in Revelation, which is the book by Uriah Smith, in that book, there was a different perspective of Daniel 11:40 than was opened up in the first dispensation. Our first reaction was that Uriah Smith was wrong, but there wasn't any real evidence to back that up. So now we will cover each perspective and decide once and for all who was right, Jeff Pippinger or Uriah Smith. So this is Daniel 11:40, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So that is Daniel 11:40, the verse we will be talking about in this lesson.
So the Millerites' perspective of Daniel 11:48. Now the Millerites didn't really have an A and B, but that's how we split it up to kind of break up the information. So A, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. The Millerites' interpretation of Daniel 11:36 forward is different from ours. The Millerites believe the verses 36 to 39 were talking about France and the French Revolution. And by the way, that's supposed to be Bonaparte. It's not in the French Revolution, that's in Egypt, as you can see by the pyramids. But we'll get to that later. They also knew that 1798 was the time of the end, but they explained verse 40 differently than us, and they had only one time of the end, not two. They believed that the king of the south was Egypt and the king of the north was Turkey. Those are the countries that correspond to the Ptolemaic and Seleucid empires in Daniel 11, the original king of the south and king of the north, respectively. The hymn in part A was France. In 1798, France wanted to attack England, when Napoleon Bonaparte knew that he couldn't do that wisely until the fall. So he decided to attack Egypt and cut off England's trade in the meantime. On May 3rd, Napoleon set off to Egypt to carry out his plan. He gathered a big army and navy to go with him. He took control of the Egyptian city Alexandria on July 5th. After that, he fought a few battles against the Mamelukes, which were the Egyptian soldiers, which he easily won. He also went into the capital, Cairo. Egypt, the king of the south, pushed or very weakly resisted the French.
So like she said, this is a picture of Napoleon in Egypt.
So Daniel 11:40 part B, and like she said, there wasn't technically a part B, but we split it up that way. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. On September 2nd, 1798, Turkey declared war on France. On February 27, 1799, Napoleon left Cairo, Egypt, and went to Syria. On March 8th, he laid siege to an Ottoman city in what was known as the Siege of Aki, but after 60 days, he was forced to retreat. This marked the first defeat in his career and another victory for Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire. According to the Millerites, France was the him in verse 40, and Turkey was the king of the north. Therefore, the verse would read, and Turkey shall come against France like a whirlwind. The come against like a whirlwind simply means with more force when comparing it with Egypt's feeble resistance to France in the first part of verse 40.
Picture.
That's Napoleon and who is this?
The Sultan of Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So the Millerized version of verse 40 would read, "And at the time of the end shall Egypt push at France, and Turkey shall come against France like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And Turkey shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over."
So along with Daniel 11:40, we're also going to talk about the Syrian wars that were in the Millerite history and the wars that's in our history because it's connected with the same people. The first Egyptian-Ottoman War was from 1831 to 1833. The war was between Egypt, who was the king of the south, and in this map you can see Egypt at the top part of Africa, which is really the bottom left. So the war was between Egypt, who was the king of the south, and the Ottoman Empire, the king of the north. And the Ottoman Empire, yes? Yes?
So the Millerites or Uriah Smith, whoever it was, they looked at this map and said, all right, well, who took over the geographical locations of Seleucus and Ptolemy? And they just said, oh, it's still Egypt and then Turkey and the Ottoman Empire. And that's how they chose them?
Yes. So,
Okay.
yeah, like you said on the map, this is Turkey. You can see it, the brown part. And that's not the whole Seleucid Empire, but that was part of it. So that's how they connected it with being the king of the north. And Egypt was always the king of the south territory.
Well, this is a modern map, though, because they didn't have Syria and Iraq yet. The Ottoman Empire had that whole expanse region, wasn't it? It was bigger, the Ottoman Empire then, I think.
Possibly.
Maybe.
Possibly. I don't really.
Yeah, this is a modern map.
Yeah, I do know that they didn't have Syria. They called this whole area from like Syria to down here where you can see Israel and Jerusalem. They called all that cold Syria. So it wasn't split up like that, but you might be right about more about Turkey. I'm not sure. So the wars between Turkey, which is the king of the north, and Egypt, which is the king of the south. The war began when an Egyptian general besieged Acre, and Acre was a place ruled by the king of the north, Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire. After that, Egypt took control of other Ottoman territories. The war lasted until 1833 when Egypt had control of Syria and a lot of Arabia. Since they were fighting over Syria, this was a victory for Egypt. So Egypt down here took control of Syria, which is right here, and a lot of Arabia. You can see Arabia as the orange. And since that's what they were fighting over, this war was Egypt was the winner of the war. And the war was from 1831 to 1833.
1839 to 1841. After the first Egyptian-Ottoman War, another one started a few years later. The second Egyptian-Ottoman War was from 1839 to 1841. Like the first, it was also in Syria. That makes it 2 wars and the space in between them 10 years long, or a 10-year war in Syria. The Ottoman Empire, or Turkey, which was the king of the north, didn't like how the king of the south, which is Egypt, had gotten control of Syria. So they started the second war to try to regain control of Syria. The first major battle was the Battle of Nizip on June 24, 1939. The Ottomans lost badly to the Egyptians. The Sultan of Turkey thought that his throne was in danger from the Viceroy of Egypt, who was actually supposed to be under his leadership. And so he thought that the Viceroy of Egypt was trying to take control of all of Turkey. The 4 great powers of Europe also began to think that Egypt would take over the Ottoman Empire, and they didn't want that. So the Sultan of Turkey began to rely on the European powers to protect him. In July of 1840, they held a convocation in London to make a peace treaty between Egypt and Turkey. Convention. Representatives from Turkey were there, and when it was done, it was taken to the leader of Egypt. The peace treaty arrived on August 11, 1840. So that's how we get that Turkey surrendered on August 11, 1840. That's when the peace treaty that the 4 European powers made on behalf of Turkey got to Egypt where it was supposed to be. So it was said that the peace treaty said that Egypt had to give up some of Syria to Turkey, and that they also have to give Turkey back their fleet that had surrendered to Egypt while they were fighting. In exchange, the descendants of the current viceroy of Egypt will be the successors to that position. The viceroy of Egypt agreed on August 15th, and he returned the Ottoman fleet as well. In the winter of 1840 and 1841, the Egyptians left Syria, and that was the end of the end of the second war between Egypt and Turkey, who are the king of the north and the king of the south, as we saw in verse 40. So this is supposed to be the battle of Nizip.
And
That's what it is.
those people that you see right here, that's the Ottoman Empire soldiers. You can see by the flag on the horse.
So this is the line that we just talked about. It's a 10-year war in Syria, mostly in Syria. It was from the first war was from 1831 to 1833, and Egypt won that one. And the second war was from 1839 to 1841. And I guess you can say Turkey won, or I don't know, he would say won. It kind of ended probably really with a draw because they both got something. But anyway, it's 1839 to 1841. It's the second war and the second Ottoman War between the King of the North and the King of the South.
Isn't it kind of confusing though, because the Millwrights had already decided that the Ottoman Empire fell in 1840,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how could there be a king of the north if it fell? I don't.
Well,
Could you repeat that? Or
How
did you
could
hear
it-
the
how could
king
there
of
be
the
a king
north
of
if
the-
it failed?
Did you want to answer that? Do you want me
Okay, in 1790, you can go first.
to?
I don't know what you mean. The Ottoman Empire fell on August 11th, 1840.
Yeah.
And the only part of the war that continued past that was Egypt taking its troops out of Syria.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's how it
Yeah.
ended in 1844. The Ottoman
1840.
1841. Sorry, the Ottoman Empire was already, surrendered because that's when she read the paragraph how it put itself under control of European powers. In the last lesson, the week before this week, we talked about how Turkey put itself under control of European powers to end the Second World. And
This week more explains how they did that
Yeah.
last week.
hmm So they have been defeated in 40, but the war ended till 41 because Egypt was just doing all the withdrawing and all the conditions that the treaty told them to do. Does that explain your question?
Yep.
So the 144,000 perspective of Daniel 11:40. Part A. Now we actually have a part A and a part B. So part A is, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. The time of the end was 1798. In 1798, the king of the south, France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, pushed against him, the king of the north, the papacy under Pope Pius VI. Napoleon's general Berthier marched unhindered into the Vatican on February 10, 1798. The French army took everything they wanted, including things the Vatican had promised them. The Pope himself was taken captive and remained in captivity until August 29, 1799, when he died. So what this meant was what the Vatican promised them is that in 1797, France and the Vatican made a treaty, and the Vatican promised to give France some artwork and stuff from Rome. So that's what the French army took along with other stuff they wanted in 1798. And in the picture, that is supposedly the Pope being taken captive.
There we go. The resurrection of the papacy. After its death, the king of the north will resurrect and resume its full power. Previous to 1798, we know that the papacy, who was the king of the north, had been fighting a war with France, who was the king of the south. In 1798, the Pope was taken captive by France. This was the deadly wound for the papacy. The next year, the Pope died in captivity, and this marked the death of the papacy that we know had to have come since it got its deadly wound. We know that the papacy will be a major power in our history, so that means it must resurrect because it can't be a power while it's dead. The papacy's will is to control, and it gets that power. The papacy's will is to control, and it gets that power by combining church and state. So if the church can control the state, this means we can mark the resurrection of the papacy at the Sunday law. This is where it will gain its full power. So at the Sunday law, the papacy will resurrect, and in the picture we have a church and the United States flag, and that represents church and state. So here's the line. This is the line of the resurrection of the papacy. It was a war previous to 1798, which was between France and the papacy. In 1798, France took the Pope captive, and that was a deadly wound. The papacy slowly deteriorated till 1799, where we mark the death of the papacy. And we know in the future it will resurrect, and that future is the Sunday law.
Part B. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. We use the chiasm to determine who the players are in our version of Daniel 11, verse 40. In part A, the characters were the king of the south and him, who we define as the king of the north. And so in part B, the players are the king of the north and him, who we define as the king of the south. It is a chiasm, the king of the south attacking the king of the north, and the king of the north attacking the king of the south. The king of the north is the same in part B as it is in part A, the papacy. But the papacy isn't the only king of the north. The United States is also the king of the north in the history of part B, as we will see. The king of the south was not France anymore either. In the history of Daniel 11:40b, the king of the south was the USSR. The USSR, like France, was the king of the south. Both tightly controlled religion, and both were arch enemies of the papacy or the king of the north. In the history of 1989 and leading up to that year, the papacy under John Paul II worked with the United States under President Ronald Reagan to bring down the Soviet Union. The papacy and the United States were the king of the north, and the Soviet Union was the king of the south. The papacy, or the king of the north, went against the king of the south like a whirlwind, or quickly and destructively, and he used the military and the economy like sanctions to bring the Soviet Union down. Those were the chariots, horsemen, and ships. The king of the north entered the countries of the king of the south and took over them. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall. On November 11th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. And on December 3rd of that same year, Bush and Gorbachev said that the Cold War was over. The United States, or the king of the north, was the winner. And from 1989, and in 1989, the Soviet Union began to break apart and fall. And that's a picture, obviously, of the Berlin Wall being taken down.
The resurrection of the king of the south. We know that the USSR received its deadly wound in 1989 and thereafter died in 1991, but that wasn't the end of them. In 1999, with the rise of Vladimir Putin, we can see that Russia was attempting to resurrect. We can mark other dates in history as well, such as 2004 when Putin became a full-time dictator, but Russia didn't resurrect then either. Russia officially resurrected in 2019 after it won the Battle of Rafia by regaining its spheres of influence, becoming the world superpower for a short 2 years. So before 1989, there was war between the King of the North and the King of the South. That was the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. And then in 1989, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, that was when they received their deadly wound, and they slowly died until 1991 when it was their death. And Russia resurrected in 2019, and then as the line will continue, you'll see that they received their deadly wound in 2021, and then their death at the Sunday law. So verse 40 for us would read, and at the time of the end shall France push at the papacy, and the papacy in the United States shall come against the Soviet Union like a whirlwind with military and economic power. And the papacy in the United States shall enter into the USSR and shall overflow and pass over.
So 10-year war in Syria in our history. In 2011, another proxy war started in Syria. If we line up this current proxy war with the 10-year war in Milite history in Syria between the King of the North and the King of the South, Turkey and Egypt, then we would know that this war will be 10 years long. We also know that according to that war, the first and last 2 years would be significant. The first 2 years in the Syrian proxy war, or Syrian civil war as it's called, was from 2011 to 2013. In March of 2011, protests started in Syria against the President Assad and his government. The Syrian government began trying to violently stop the protests. Assad blamed the unrest on foreign interference. On July 29, 2011, the Free Syrian Army was formed, the first organized fighting group against the Syrian government. Soon, there began to be fighting between people who were for the government and people who were against the government. Since the beginning of the protests, the United States had been against Assad while Russia supported him. In 2012, there was a ceasefire that the UN planned, but it didn't work. In July 2012, the UN officially said that the fighting in Syria was a civil war. In September of that same year, the Kurds also began fighting against the government, and the fighting escalated in 2013 between those who were for and against the government. So we say it's a proxy war because the United States is backing the rebels, one of them being the Kurds. Well, the United States was backing the Kurds, and Russia is backing the government. And that's rebels. I don't know exactly which ones.
The Free Syrian Army in the picture.
The Syrian civil war will last for 10 years. It began on March 15, 2011 and will end in 2021. It is fought between the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, and those opposed to his dictatorial government. In 2019, the United States, who was supporting the Kurds, began to pull out of Syria, betraying their allies. Meanwhile, Russia stepped in and began negotiating deals with Syria. ISIS is also playing a major role in this war. The Syrian war, however, is really a proxy war between Russia and the United States. Russia is backing Assad and the United States is backing the rebels, the people in the picture.
That's the Free Syrian Army. That's their flag.
It was the Free Syrian Army the one before too.
So I know that's their flag.
But it was the
So the 10-year Syrian war in our history is from 2011 to 2021, and the first 2 years from 2011 to 2013, and the last 2 years from 2019 to 2021.
So, in summary, we looked at the two versions of Daniel 11:40, and we saw that the Millerites version. We saw the Millerites version was, at the time of the end shall France push, at the time of the end shall Egypt push at France. And then that was part A, was not really part A, but we just call it part A. And then part B was, and Turkey shall come against France like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And Turkey shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So that is the conflict of the King of the North and the King of the South for the Millerites, which is their Daniel 11:40. Our Daniel 11:40A is, at the time of the end shall France push at the papacy. That's part A. And part B is, and the papacy and the United States shall come against the Soviet Union like the whirlwind, with military and economic power. And the papacy and the United States shall enter into the USSR and shall overflow and pass over. So that's our version of Daniel 11:40 and the Millerites.
The United States gonna take over the Russia or the USSR?
They took over most of it, but they just didn't take over Russia.
By taking over, meaning that a lot of the countries that were part of the USSR started to ally with the United States and not with Russia. So that's how they took them over. Like they started to be friends with the United States.
Mm-hmm. And the only part that was left was Russia.
Man.
And then we looked at the Syrian Wars, 1831 to 41, which was the first and second Egyptian Ottoman Wars. We looked at our Syrian Wars, which was 2011 to 2021, which were the two-year Syrian Wars.
The Syrian Civil War.
Yes.
Or the Syrian proxy war, as we call it.
Okay. So now that we've looked at those, now that we know what the different perspectives of Daniel 11:40 are, just like ours, the Millerites versions was applied to events in history. So which one is right? And here in the picture we have Uriah Smith, which wrote down the Millerites version, and Jeff Pippinger, who wrote down ours in Timely Magazine. We know that Jeff Pippinger represented the first angel, and Uriah's the first angel, and afterwards he represented the empowerment of the first angel. But in 1989, he was the first angel. And he represented the first angel when God gave him our view of Daniel 11:40. Uriah Smith was a nobody, so we would think that our view was correct. But there is one thing that turns the tables. Uriah Smith didn't actually come up with his view of Daniel 11:40. He copied it from Josiah Litch. Josiah Litch was the empowerment of the first angel, so now there are two views of Daniel 11:40 from two first angels, or one first angel, one empowerment of a first angel. The truth is, both views are correct. Jesus was supposed to come in 1863, so the Millerites had to have an application of Daniel 11:40 for their time. They couldn't use 1989 because it was too far in the future. And we can't use the Millerites versions of Daniel 11:40 because we also need a version for our time. Therefore, our version doesn't make the Millerites version wrong. It just means there are different explanations for different dispensations, but they are both right. So as you see in the picture, we have Josiah Litch, first empowerment of the first angel. His version of Daniel 11 was correct, or Daniel 11:40. And our version, which is represented by Jeff, which is the first angel and the empowerment of the first angel, and his version, which is our version, is also correct. So both versions are correct.
So, does anybody have any questions about this lesson?
So the last 2 years of Millerites, Syrian proxy war, was Egypt giving up stuff, right?
Yes.
Which was King of the South. Is that same in ours? It's going to be Russia giving up stuff?
No.
Yes.
No, because the last 2 years from ours are 2019 to 2021.
Yeah. Well,
Russia
I guess you
will
would say no.
lose.
Russia.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
no.
it won't. The United States won't be like Turkey and like surrender. So I guess you can say Egypt would correspond, but not Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah. Russia keeps all of its stuff till 2021. So I said yes, that wasn't correct. Or was it that I said no?
And well, there were many different answers, but I get what you're saying. And then when at Sunday Law, when the papacy resurrects, resurrection isn't progressive, only death is, right? So it just happens instantaneously for at Sunday Law, papacy resurrects.
No, resurrection is progressive. The papacy will be gaining power all the way up to the Sunday Law. Yeah, but its official resurrection will be at the Sunday Law.
So it's that crisscrossing, one is declining, one is rising kind of thing that we do from Panium to Sunday Law. Has it been rising from longer ago?
Yes, it has been. Well, you can say.
I think it will be that crisscross one going down and one coming up, because that's when the Russia will be falling, so the King of the South is going down, and that's when that's papacy, but the King of the North is going up.
You do see Seleucus rising, maybe, in Panium to Sunday Law, but also we know that we're in the reform line of the papacy currently. So you could mark them rising now. You could mark it at Panium, or you could just say Sunday Law. Probably depends on your story.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But
Thank you.
who were you talking about when you said it's declining and rising at the same time?
That was from the King of the North, King of the South model, because I've been wondering about that. Because I'm like, the King of the North, the state power, the United States is rising up. King of the South is declining. But I didn't see a progressive rise in the third diadochi where I thought it was just at Sunday Law. It's poop. There it is. It's just arrived on the scene. So I don't know.
Well, in the third diadochi war, there was a progressive rise of Seleucus. He rose from at the end of the Peace of the Dynast, which was 311.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And what's that lineup with? The Panium. Yeah, so it is progressive with Panium to the Sunday Law.
Yeah, that's what Samaria said. That's good. Thank you.
So, anybody have any other questions or comments on the message in general? You can type it in the chat if you want to.
Oh, quick, can I share something?
Yeah.
Oh, you guys, never mind.
Share. Oh, no, you can share.
Hold on. Yes. Where is it? Can you guys see that?
Yes.
The Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is it supposed to be?
Ottoman Empire.
Oh.
Is that showing up right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
you can see it.
That's how it looked.
Yeah.
That's how it used to look.
Yeah. I remember Egypt looked like that, but I didn't know
So,
Empire looked like that.
So you really see how the Sultan.
yeah, so it looks a lot like what. So, go on, sorry.
I didn't really hear what you said. You were breaking up.
It just looks a lot like this. It looks a lot like the Seleucid Empire and Ptolemaic Empire.
Yeah, it does look more like it.
Yeah. It was the Seleucid Empire. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing.
Anyways.
Yeah, thank you.
This was a good study. Thanks, guys. Helped me a lot.
Welcome.
You're welcome.
So we continue the notes.
So anybody have anything else they want to share?
Sorry, I got kicked off. It keeps kicking me off the study. But yeah, I'll get the notes from the.
Okay.
Do we have a quiz?
The quiz is next week.
Yeah.
Come next week. And
okay.
So just as a reminder, yes, next week there will be a quiz on this lesson for next week. On next week.
And you're welcome, Coleman family. They said thank you for the studies. So if nobody has any questions, thank you for coming. If you want notes, updates, which sometimes we have recordings, or if you have more questions on the notes or the Midnight Cry message, you can contact us at youthprophecygroup@gmail.com. And
if you want notes for like to continue receiving notes. If you want old notes, go to sacramentofellowship.weebly.com/youthprophecygroup.
Yeah, we also have like a form on that website, so you can put in a request for notes, and you don't even have to email us. Well, it is emailing us, but you can do it from the website.
So thank you everybody for coming. And now we will close with prayer if nobody has any more questions or comments. Okay, we'll close with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Thank you for bringing us all here. Thank you for this lesson, and please give us more understanding of the Millerite history and of our own history. Thank you for giving us the understanding we have, and be with us and give us the power to be able to remember this and understand it. And thank you for calling us to be priests and part of the 144,000, and give us the power to be able to take the message to the Levites and Nethinims and to teach people in heaven. We love you. Thank you for first loving us. Amen.
Amen.
So thank
you
you
for coming.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.